buenos días, buenas tardes, y buenas noches at whatever time you're watching our show. So welcome to Business Matters with Laura Nowlin podcast. And before we get started, I do want to give a big shout out to all our sponsors. See Us Now Staffing. You can reach out to them if you're looking for talent at 702-902-2448. And our filming studio, you can reach out to Andrea Michelle Creativa Consulting at 702-296-6242. And today my hair is done by my hairdresser. She's been my hairdresser for over 10 years. Her name is Maria Boulevard, and she is on Buffalo and Sahara Beauty and Wellness Salon, 702-845-9696. And then today's makeup, my makeup artist is Patty Rubio, and her phone number is 702-518-3422. So now let's get started. Today, our guest is Diego Trujillo. He's the CEO of Las Vegas Heels. Welcome, Diego. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, no, I am sure you're going to have so much exciting stuff to share with us.
I have a couple of things.
Yes.
All right.
But first, let's start off with telling us, because we're not scripted. Our show's not scripted.
We're going off the rails here.
We're going off the rails.
We'll
we speak from our heart and we shoot from the hip, okay? So I want to get started with first telling us where you're from. Are you originally from Las Vegas? And if not, how did you get here?
It's the mystery, right?
Right.
I'm born and raised here in Las Vegas. My parents are both Colombian immigrants that met here in the United States. Fell in love, and then along came Diego. So they were in Los Angeles, and then right when my mom got pregnant, they were planning a move to Las Vegas. And so they came to Las Vegas, and shortly after I was born at what is now UMC. It used to be a women's hospital, and so that's where little Diego came into the community. So I've been born and raised here most of my life. I lived a couple of years in Nicaragua, and then in school I went to Texas to go live.
Awesome. Then, entonces, ¿hablas español?
Claro que sí.
Oh, look at that. It's so nice that our parents didn't allow us to forget us, forget how to learn
growing
Spanish.
Up, we were not allowed to talk Spanish, or we were not allowed to talk English at home.
Yeah.
It was really interesting because we spoke Spanish once we went to school. We just switched to English. And so my dad was very strict. En la casa se habla español. And so they really pushed a lot to make that happen. And then I had the accent. And then I got sent to Nicaragua where, I just got used to flowing in Spanish and getting more prepared. And I do a lot of public speaking in Spanish. So
oh, do you?
A lot
That's
of
good
effort.
To know.
All right.
Yeah.
I listen to Spanish radio stations, so like podcasts and things like that to get more articulate in Spanish.
So my dad used to always say, hija, que no se te olvide ese nopal que tienes en la frente. Yeah. So it's like you wouldn't let us forget just how to speak Spanish.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you've been here for Vegas pretty much your whole life then, like you were saying, off and on. So tell us a little bit more of, how did you get to Heels, right? Las Vegas Heels.
It's a very long story.
Yes. We have time. We have 30 minutes.
But I'll summarize, right? No. So I started off, originally my degree, was in theology. And so I knew it's something that I wanted to learn. I wanted to serve the community. My father was he was a pastor here in church for over 20 years. And in addition to that, he was a court interpreter. That's why the language was so important for him, because he's like, son, if you learn this skill, I bill $80 an hour. And if it's private, it was $120 an hour. So it was always a skill he wanted me to pick up on and learn. From there, I got my degree in theology. I wanted to serve the community. I worked in church for a couple of years, and then somebody said, you'd be a great hospice chaplain. And I didn't know what working in church was not. It was very, very hard to make ends meet. And so I was like, well, I'll try it out, see what it's about. I joined hospice as a chaplain and just fell in love with hospice. So hospice, for people that aren't familiar, is end-of-life care, right? So once there's nothing else that we can medically do for you, what we want to do is really manage your symptoms. And so I just found a lot of fulfillment in that job, walking, in a time where everyone, I don't know what to say or what do you do or what, right? That's when I had to come in. Or from there, I made the transition after about a year into marketing. And so working in healthcare marketing, specifically in hospice, you're building relationships with case managers, hospitals, skilled nursing facilities, assisted living. And so the way that you come into the picture, because people don't understand what the liaison does, is as soon as somebody's been given the worst news of their life, which is, hey, there's nothing else that we can do, I'm the next one that comes in the room and says, okay, what are your goals? What did the doctors tell you? What do you want? And then we try to make that a reality as much as possible, keep people comfortable. We just want her to go home and just to be comfortable there with everyone around. And so that's what we would do. I would set up the discharge, get the transport ready, all the durable medical equipment, everything they would need, type up the notes and get everything to the nurses. And so that's how I entered healthcare.
Right. That is a tough position. It really is. But you really have to have a heart and a love for people. And I like how you said it, that marketing, right?
Yeah.
Typically marketers, because I have a marketing degree.
Yeah,
we
right.
love people.
Yes. Yeah.
So the right personality to be able to take on that type of job.
Typically, and it's there's a duality to it, which I would always describe, because I am 6'6". I'm a giant man, and so I have this outgoing personality. And when I train marketers and speak with marketers, right, one of the things I would always tell them, hey, if you want to be remembered, you need to be remarkable. Have something that stands out. Learn what it is that you have that makes you unique. And for me, I'm very lucky that I'm so tall and I'm loud, but then that really shifted the minute that you'd go into a room, because you can't go in with the salesman approach. And let me tell you all the right things, right? This is the end of life care for somebody. You only get one shot. We can't say, oh, sorry, let's try again, when your other relative dies or when your other spouse died. It doesn't work like that. And so there's a real shift of energy when, a case manager would say, hey, honey, there's someone in room 326. Can you go speak to them? And so, I'd head to the room and then pause for a second and then I'd walk into the room. Hello, how are you doing? My name is Diego Trujillo. I'm here from, ABC Hospice, and, I'm here to talk to you about. And so that's where the shift would be. And it was a lot more listening. Hospice is very different in that you're not trying to kind of convince, and sales should be listening, right? But it'd just be listening to their needs and then seeing how you can adjust and how you could be there to serve them in that time. And so
that is so touching.
Yeah.
It really is. I remember when my brother-in-law got sent home on hospice, and it's very difficult for the family. And so having someone that has that personality like yours, I'm sure that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
It really does.
Well, I'm hoping I did well.
Yes. And so how long did you do that for?
So I did that from, 2013 till about 2020.
Okay.
Yeah, and so during that time period, I started a group called Vegas Healthcare. There's a dynamic, and this will kind of go into why I do what I do, that you'll find in healthcare is it's very siloed work. And what I mean by that is everyone exists within their silos, and I found that there was a lot of people in need, there was a lot of resources, and they just didn't have a way to find each other. And I'll give you an example of that, right? I remember sitting in a room one time with a case manager, and the physician walks in and the doctor says, hey, 320 is going to discharge, but they don't have any social security number, any insurance, and they need a wheelchair. And, you see both of them go, all right, how am I going to solve this problem? And I remember I right in the moment, I was like, hey, there's an assisted living facility like right down the street that has like 30 wheelchairs in a back room. They'd happily donate one. And I realized these are the small little connections that needed to be made. And sure enough, they made a call, got the wheelchair there, and the patient had a wheelchair. Otherwise, those would have gone to a landfill. There's so much waste, right? And so that's where I had the idea of starting a group for Facebook to be able to share events. And when these things happen, I was familiar with groups. Someone had created a group chat. I don't know if you remember when a friend of ours created a group chat back in the day when you get added to a Facebook group and then a group chat, everyone would start writing, and all of a sudden your phone would get hit with notifications. Yeah.
You're like silent.
I know. And everyone's like, can you let me out of here? Who added me to this? Everyone starts complaining.
Yes.
So we created, I talked to them and I was like, hey, the way we should do this is a group. And so we created a group on Facebook. That Facebook group kind of took off. We got 300 or 400 people that had joined that group. This is in 2016. By 2017, we were at like 600.
That's good.
So I was very excited to watch the growth. We'd be able to share, what's happening. And then at one point, we posted a picture. We were having lunch somewhere, and we said, oh, we had a Vegas healthcare meeting. Once we announced that, somebody responded, how come I wasn't invited?
Right.
And it was the CEO of one of the smaller hospitals, and I was like, well, we should do something. And so I made a call to the community and said, hey, if you're interested in serving the community and helping out and helping to facilitate the coordination of care in Las Vegas, come. And like 80 people showed up in the middle of the day.
Nice.
And I was kind of blown away. And so I was like, there's something here. And so we eventually came to the agreement. of starting to do events and to do things that would help to bring that community, that healthcare community together, because you're very reliant on each other. Hey, does somebody know, a facility that has this? And so we really depend on each other to be able to solve patient problems. That group grew. Currently, we're at about 14,000 healthcare workers in that group here in Southern Nevada. So these are the people that are engaging with patients constantly. We started a nursing group that has about 5.6, maybe 5.8, but 5.6, I always round down because then they say I'm exaggerated.
Right. We're marketing majors.
Right, yeah,
Hello.
I know. We have like 15,000. No, we're well over. We're like 14.4 thousand. And then the other group has like 5.6 thousand nurses in that group. And so what I saw was an ability for us to be able to connect, to be able to solve dynamic problems for people with very dynamic solutions. And so at that point, there's a lot of shortages and things that I saw throughout the community that we would try to address. And at that point, the leadership at Las Vegas Heals, some of the board members sat me down. And honestly, I'll tell you a funny story because I don't share this a lot with everyone. At that point, I had switched companies. I had moved to another company that I was very disheartened with. I was like, I got to get out of here. I was unemployed and they had a dinner that was like $350. And I used a credit card to pay for the dinner. And I was like, well, I'm going to go to this Heels Gala and see what it's about.
Yeah.
And it's going to put me around different people. And I ended up going to this dinner. And after going to this dinner, they said, hey, why don't you come and tour the office? And I don't know why. When I toured the office, I remember the first time the guy said, well, we're definitely taking a look because eventually someone needs to, take over this. And I don't know why in the back of my head, I was like, well, why can't it be you, right?
Right.
And a year later, they sat me down and, they're having this conversation. They said, how are you doing all of this, And I said, well, from my cell phone while I'm going from facility to facility. And they were blown away when I was running Vegas Healthcare. And they're like, our CEO is stepping down. And after they let me know the CEO's stepping down and we're interested in you replacing him, and I just kind of sat back and I'm not a CEO. And I told them that. I was like, my degree's in theology, but I don't have the business background. And I kind of let them know. And they immediately turned around and said, you absolutely are a CEO. You just don't know it. So we're going to, if you accept the position, we're willing to show you and, we'll teach you what you don't know. And so I was like, give me some days to think about this. And I have this attitude where you should never be embarrassed to not know how to do something, right? So people like applying at jobs and things like this, they'll say, yeah, but I'm not sure because I don't know how to do that. Okay, well, you can continue not knowing.
Right.
A. B, you could be bad at something you don't know how to do. There's no shame in that whatsoever, right? Or third, you learn how to do it and you got a new skill. I say this a lot with people when they're learning new languages, right? So I was around a lot of immigrants growing up and they'd see like, yeah, but I took 3 English classes or 17 English classes. I've been here for 5 years. Why don't you speak English? I don't know. I'm embarrassed. Of what? Your a second language? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Just start using it. And you don't know something, that's fine not to know something, but sometimes we get ashamed of not knowing. And so I'm very not like that. And I've learned a lot of skills, and that's got me kind of everywhere I'm at. Well, I don't know. And so I remember thinking it over and thinking, well, if I accept the position and I fail, then they're going to blame the board and say, who are the idiots that put the theology major in charge, right? That was their bad decision. But if I'm able to pull this off, now I have this on my resume, and so I accepted the position. And so that's when I took over. A week before lockdown, I took over the organization of Las Vegas Heals. So it's been quite a learning curve, right?
Yes. And how much have you grown ever since you've taken over? Because your personality, you have the personality for it. You're a marketer.
So there is that side. There's a lot of knowledge. The organization was really struggling by the time I took it over, and they just kind of handed the keys and said, all right. And I didn't know what was going on. So there was a huge learning curve when I took over the organization, where there was things it couldn't do, things that it was lacking in. And so I would say it took me about 2 years to kind of even have a good understanding of, all right, this is what we need to do.
Okay.
I remember I took a trip to the Galapagos Islands during that time period. Shortly after taking it over, I had been there for about a year. And I was like, I'm working with all these people with a master's in health administration and doctors and, public health workers and all these people that are experts. And so on this journey, I was kind of like, what do you do? Like, what are you bringing to the table? And so I took time to really, along hikes and when we would go do things, and I would think on that question. That was the one thing that for me was, my skill set is that I'm just very good at bringing people together. Who needs to be at the table? And so when that, I would make these call to actions, and I would see throughout history, this is what I'm able to do. And so once I kind of embraced that, I realized what the new vision would be for Las Vegas Heals, what this state needed. Back then I was thinking city, right? But what the state needed, and what we needed for regionally, right? And it came to me one time, I was sitting at a conference that was put on at one of the universities here by one of the newspapers. And every question they would ask regarding healthcare, they would say, hey, when it comes to women's health and seeing that Roe v. Wade has been revoked, and then I would listen to the question and the answer. Then they would say, well, due to the shooting in Uvalde 2 weeks ago, when it comes to mental health, and I was like, why do we always wait for terrible things to happen to start shaping what healthcare should be? We're completely on our heels, and we're completely reactive. And I always ask this question of people, right? Is how many people jump out of windows in the hotels here in Las Vegas?
It's kept a secret.
Yeah, right. It happens all the time.
Yes,
because we work in skilled nursing facilities. I'd have friends. I'd be like, man, I got a 5th floor jumper out of this. And, their back is a mess. They're 28 years old, and I remember thinking in that moment, why is it that these things happen and we don't hear about it? Because even though the casinos compete with each other, they all are in agreement with what the story is. And I think when it comes to healthcare, one of the things that has been lacking is a community that would tell that story and that would control the narrative, that would shape, because without a story, you don't have a history. And without a history, you can't develop a vision. And what we need is a vision for the type of healthcare that we deserve and that we should have, instead of just being reactive to legislation, being reactive to the shortfalls, but rather building towards a future that we need to have. And if we don't have a vision, we're not going anywhere, right? And unfortunately, all we have at that point is just a bunch of companies competing, and everyone's cutting each other's throats, and no one's working together as a collaborative for the industry that we need. And so that was kind of my big aha moment, was to become the voice of healthcare in Southern Nevada, and then eventually, my vision's a little bit bigger than that, right, is to become the voice of healthcare in Nevada.
And so I know that I had the privilege of going to one of your breakfasts, and it's very well attended. I mean, you had representatives. There were also even from the governor's office, some friends that I was able to run into.
Yeah.
And so from all different industries, from builders of building hospitals, from doctors, surgeons, quite a bit of people there. How do you feel that your organization represents them best, and in what platform?
So for us, it's a vital need on a couple of different ways. And I always explain my organization kind of twofold. And the first one is, as a chamber, we're a healthcare chamber where you can network, you can make connections, get referrals, help to grow your business, position yourself, advertise, etc. And the other one is on the larger vision of what we do. The event that you attended is an invite-only event, actually, that I inherited. I started going to that meeting, and a year later, they were like, hey, I'm ready to retire. Do you want to take over, kid? And I was like, so that's how I got that one. That one is an invite-only breakfast that they would do at a golf course that would have all the heads of heads. And so what I started noticing is there is a disconnect between the workforce and the people working on the ground, between all of the leadership and decision makers, and then even worse, between the people in government. And so this is where the fragmentation really begins to hurt us. And I always use the explanation of like a herd, right? In animals or fish, the reason that they shoal, the reason that they do that is to protect themselves from predators, to be able to pivot as a community and be able to adapt. And that's what we can't do. So when it comes to workforce, if we want to develop a plan, let's say the governor says, okay, we need to fix workforce. How do they do that within healthcare? How would you go about, so someone needs to go to every single businesses, get them on board, have them attend meetings, share their information. That's an extremely difficult task to do. And so one of the things that we need, in my opinion, is a tight community that is able to look at the needs that we have, protect ourselves from predators. We see that in mental health and the fraud. You weren't there for that presentation. That was eye-opening. To protect ourselves from fraud. But outside of that, how do we present our problems to legislators in a way that makes sense? Because otherwise, they're coming to us and saying, what are the issues that we can work on? Everyone starts yelling about what they're angry about, but not really presenting any solvable problems. Hey, this is an issue, and here's an easy way to address it. And so we're just kind of throwing things at our legislators. And when I speak with legislators, they say, hey, you guys are just so disorganized. Nobody shows up when we make a call. And I had seen this firsthand. I'll give you an example. Medicaid changed its payment system in the state. And when they changed their payment system, there were some problems, and a lot of the PCA agencies weren't getting paid.
Oh, a lot of them went under. They closed.
They had to close their doors.
Sad. It's very sad.
And even worse, you had the employees saying, well, you're stealing the money. You're getting paid and you're not paying us. So there was all of this, this kerfuffle happens. I start getting contacted by these agencies. Hey, is there any way that we could speak to the governor's office? No problem. I reach out to my contact at the governor's office. He goes, fantastic. Let's sit down and talk to them and see what we can do. So I reach out to all of them and say, let the other companies know. And so we set up a Zoom call. We all jump on the Zoom call. 2 companies join. And so they're sitting there like looking like, well, okay, well, there's 2 of you, right? And that was a perfect, and then I start getting all of the text messages. Hey, sorry, I couldn't be there. Hey, sorry, I couldn't make it. And so I'm frustrated because I'm like, are you kidding me? I went through all of this to get you guys the attention. This is to solve you. I don't own a PCA agency. I have 0 horse in this race, right? But I'm doing this for your industry. And to their defense, because I don't want to put it at them and say, well, everyone's just apathetic. Everyone doesn't care. That's not really the case here. What happens in my analogy that I use, it's everyone's house is on fire. We're all short-staffed. We're all trying to take care of patients.
Yes.
And because our house is on fire, we don't have time to step away from an HOA meeting to make a plan to clear the brush so our house stops catching on fire. And so it's just a perpetual fire that we can't address as a community. And so that's where my challenge lies. That's where my white hair comes from, is trying to figure out, like, how do we get people to stop for a moment and say, I know your time's valuable. I know there's a lot you need to do. You need to step away to come to this meeting. And so it's twofold. My responsibility is not just to get their attention and to bring these owners together. It's to make sure that when they do step away to have a meeting, that they're not wasting their time. Because that's what people feel like, well, another meeting where we're just going to talk about the problem and no solutions are going to come. And so that's always my promise. If you guys promise to unite, I promise not to waste your time. And I say that to the physicians in the community. I say that to the different companies in the community. And that's kind of where the follow through is very important. Make sure you do what you're going to say you're going to do. If you guys have a meeting, make sure there's structure. The AI has been phenomenal because you could just get transcripts, create a summary, get action items and deliverables, and then start assigning them. And so I learned from one of my mentors, Dr. Jerry Reeves, when he's in a meeting, he's like the reporter, right? Who, what, when, and by, and how, right? So anytime someone goes, well, we should come up with a resource list. Cool. Who's going to do that? When will you have it by?
Right.
How will it be done? Who's going to support? Yeah, otherwise, we're just meeting to look at each other, and everyone's busy, and we have things to do. And so it's very important. That template has helped me tremendously, both in my personal businesses that I run, and also in the meetings that I run, in bringing these coalitions together.
You just described pretty much all industries right now.
Yeah.
And not just in the state of Nevada, but pretty much the whole United States.
There's a little bit of chaos, I've heard.
Very shorthanded, right? Our workforce is not quite where it needs to be, especially in the medical industry. Especially in the medical industry here in Nevada, because we weren't producing the medical staff that we needed to produce. That was a problem that we've had for years, right? And then after that, once they graduate, how do we keep them here?
Yeah.
It's been a major issue.
There is a disconnect, and this is something that when you look at workforce circles and what it means to actually build pipelines, career pathways, and to make it make sense, that sometimes we create solutions for people without ever asking their input. So that's like, for me, creating
legislation. The legislators, they make decisions, they pass things, and it's like, who thought of that?
Right. Well,
do you understand how it can impact us?
Sometimes we do this as businesses, right?
Yes.
And so for me, it's as if I try to create a product, a woman's hair care product for drying their hair. Unless I am a woman with long hair, there's going to be a lot I don't know. So I can kind of assume a lot. And I learned that when I was working here locally on workforce issues. I remember one time at a coalition meeting, they asked the question, right? And when they're like, well, we have this and this and this. And I just raised my hand and said, did anybody here go through CCSD? And it was just like, it was blank stares everywhere. And I was like, well, I went through CCSD, so let me tell you what it's like going through school, right? And I grew up on the east side by Trop and Pecos, so I went to Chaparral, Woodbury, and I would tell them, my biggest issue that I see immediately is when I was 13. So the reason I got sent to live in Nicaragua is I told my parents, I don't know why you guys keep pushing me and make school such a priority. I could just drop out and go get a job at valet and make $90,000 a year. And that wasn't an untrue statement, right? It's the nature of where we lived. Everyone had a parent or a friend whose relative was a dealer or worked as a porter or worked in all these positions, and they could provide for their family and make a living. And my parents immediately were like, you are not adopting, right? They're very Colombian. They're like, you're not adopting that mentality. You need to go see how the real world is, right? So they're like, so they sent me to Nicaragua because they prioritized education. And so for me, that was one of the things was, hey, when you're in high school here, you can name, 20 jobs in a casino. I can name 2 in healthcare. And that's doctor or nurse. And I didn't want to be either of those, right? If I knew marketing was a position where I'd get a company card and I could pay people to lunch and dinner and buy snacks and handouts, and I get really meaningful work with patients that really need my help at the time I step in, God, I would have shot for that career, right? But I was unaware that these careers existed. And so I think the emphasis on workforce has brought a lot of emphasis on how do we show these careers. I know a lot of my work within workforce is about exposure and letting them know these are the different jobs that exist and these are the different pathways to get to those jobs. And so that's, I think, the big thing now when we look at workforce. And I'm noticing that kind of when I built my workforce plan, I remember showing it to a state senator and he goes, can you do this in the trades? And I was like, well, yeah, I kind of built a generic. You can kind of just copy and paste in the different industries, but the model itself kind of works the same. And so it's been an interesting journey. I never thought the workforce pipeline, right? If I didn't think healthcare, workforce pipeline was even less of what I had thought about.
Yeah, no, well, I'm definitely involved in the workforce development here for the last 18 years here in Vegas. So I feel, So right now, the legislators are in session.
Yes.
For 120 days. They started yesterday. Is there any bills, anything that you're looking at that you would like us to maybe focus on? Anything way that we can help you as a voice from the community? Because here are the complaints that we hear, right? It's really hard to get an appointment with the doctor. When I finally go see the doctor, I have to wait for hours to see the doctor. Sometimes then the doctor never comes in, or the doctor just comes in and signs off and then walks out. But then you hear the complaints from the doctor. I'm short-staffed. My bills are not getting paid. And so how do I survive? I don't have enough time. I'm pretty much stretched out like a rubber band.
Yeah.
So what are you guys trying to maybe focus on so then that way we can try to address some of the bills that you guys are trying to pass and we can help?
So and that's a very good point. Again, the storytelling. I'm very big on storytelling. I teach my kids this. Our ability to be able to convey information and why it matters to people is very important as an industry. One of the bills that we're looking at, right, is the Medicaid reimbursement. So the Patient Protection Commission has put forth 3 bills. I don't have the Senate bill numbers in front of me, but I can get them for you for the show notes. There's a few bills specifically. One of them looks at getting the Senate bill that will address the Medicaid. It will address some of the Medicaid payments that are made and look to increase that. A lot of reasons why people are like, well, why are we so short-staffed, right? If you pay doctors less, then why would I do more work when I can get paid the same, or I can make more money doing the same thing in many other states? So that's something that needs to get addressed. One of the things that we're looking at, so the health information exchange is probably a big one for us, just simply because when people say, what is one magic wand you could wave that would kind of help? Medicaid is the first one. For me, the health information exchange is second. And a lot of people don't know what that looks like, but the people think that the healthcare providers and hospitals and all of them communicate. They don't. They still send faxes. And so for those of you that are watching that don't know what a fax is, there used to be these things called telephone lines, and they would take a paper and scan it. That's how antiquated the system is. So there is a nonprofit that works to house all of the data. So when you go get an MRI, when you go get an imaging scan, when you go to the hospital, all of those notes are taken and they're centrally kept. So if you go to the hospital with stomach pain, and let's say you go to one system, and then 2 weeks later you have stomach pain and you go to another system, they're not going to have the records or no. Well, I just did scans 2 weeks ago. We can't access them. Let's send it again. So now they're billing Medicaid a second time for the exact same thing when that scam could have told them that. And so in addition to other things, they use that. UMC uses a lot. There's a doctor that gives a lot of testimonials. One time that, they had a patient that had come in. They didn't have, except for the name, they didn't have any other information. It was an accident. The patient wasn't responsive. And he got on and looked and, do not give him penicillin. right, is able to see allergies and things that are wrong. Sometimes some of the treatment plans, when someone's having a stroke, well, do we need their blood thinner or thicker? That decision can make a really big difference.
Oh,
and
yes.
so being able to pull up a patient's medical history and treat them, I mean, this should seem kind of obvious, right? It's like if you're going to fix a car, would you rather go in blind or would you rather have a set of instructions and YouTube videos that'll tell you how to fix it?
Right.
And so that's something that we're looking at. With the Health Information Exchange, and then a couple other bills that we've been looking to support. I think the Patient Protection Commission that was put together, all three of the bills, the BDRs that they got, are all fantastic. So they're all things, the Nursing Compact, which in my opinion helps to empower nurses. It helps us to bring in nursing now. I know there's issues that nurses have, and I'm very, very sympathetic to the issues because there are, the treatment and the caregiver burnout. It's very funny because people will say, well, no, this you can't push for this. The nurses are getting burnt out, and I see it in my group. They say it constantly. I'm just tired. I'm ready to just leave this industry. And so I think there needs to be some care and morale boost that needs to be for nurses. I think the Nursing Compact would really help for that. It gives nurses more flexibility to both come to the state and also leave. And honestly, I think by the end of this session, if we didn't join, we'd be one of 2 states that aren't part of a Nursing Compact. And so I think these kind of issues come up. You ask, what can we do? We have legislative reports that we're going to be putting out pretty soon. Once we're waiting on some of the final drafts on the bills and for them to get picked up to say, hey, this is what we're after and these are the impacts. So that's one way that we want to communicate that out to the community. And then if there's call to actions, right? Whether it be through our newsletter, whether it be through our website, but if you see things on healthcare, take the time to kind of read real quick. Sometimes it's important to write your legislator because if you don't let them know, there are very big organizations that have a tremendous amount of money and are paying people to get in front of them, telling them constantly. If you as a voter don't let your voice be known, then nothing will change. And so a lot of times people will say, well, this organization has a lobbyist and we don't have lobbyists as a populace. We do. It's called voting. That's what voting is. Let your legislator know, hey, I'm not okay with this. And they absolutely do notice. When they come into their office and all of a sudden there's 400 emails in their inbox and they got to create a new rule to get them into a separate box, that's taking their time and they're able to know, this is a hot button issue. I need to examine this closely. So taking the time to say something is very important.
Oh, that's great information. Thank you for sharing that. And so what's the best way of them being able to follow you, right, and getting a hold of you?
So LinkedIn, our information that we put out on LinkedIn is very relevant. If they have us on LinkedIn, LasVegasHeals.org. Our website, LasVegasHeals.org, also gets a lot of followers and a lot of traffic, as a matter of fact. So we will be putting legislative updates there. If you're a physician, we are starting a newsletter just for physicians that is only regarding legislative updates. So again, I told them, you're getting how many emails? What do you read? What do you not read? I was like, I'll create a newsletter that is just for physicians. I promise not to waste your time with any advertising. I'm not selling ad space on the newsletter. I'm not going to announce any events. It will just be legislative updates on things that impact your practice.
No, that's great. And then how can someone join that newsletter? Is it from the website?
Yeah, if you go to LasVegasHeals.org and then scroll to the bottom, there'll be the newsletter, and then they could sign in. Just put in your email, and then you'll be subscribed. So we got about 14,000 leaders and decision makers that get the Heals newsletter. And that newsletter that we have put together, that one's for the general public. That newsletter is everything that's happening in healthcare here. So if people want to know what's happening in healthcare, that's the best way. We also have a magazine, a digital magazine. We do some print that we also put out. So, and then we have a podcast. So the Heals Pod on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And then we also have the Vegas Healthcare Podcast. So between those 2 podcasts, I'm really trying to do the storytelling of what's happening in healthcare here in Southern Nevada, what are the services, and everything in between.
And so what is the best way that someone can support you? Because you guys are a 501c3 or are you a 501c6?
So we are a 501c6. We're a membership-based organization for those healthcare businesses. Yeah. I highly suggest, because they'll ask me, become a member. That is probably one of the greatest ways that you can support what we do. We are working on a foundation to put our educational program. So we are working on a 501c3, an educational nonprofit, where we can put our medical societies and what we do for the resident physicians and the programs that we do have running under there. And then at that point, people will be able to donate.
What type of individuals or companies out there should join your chamber?
So originally, the focus was very much on just healthcare businesses. That was kind of where my scope has been. It's been very interesting now that we've had more developers starting to kind of come on board, and people in the construction, just simply because who's going to build the hospitals, right? Who's going to take part of this? So there are some of that. We are expanding that membership base, and for me, I really enjoy. In the magazine, I told some of the builders. I was like, tell us what's interesting about building a hospital. What's different about building a hospital? I'd love to have a developer's corner on what's unique about building a medical office space versus just an office space. And so I'm hoping that community gets a little more engaged on what that looks like. As far as real estate and commercial real estate, right? The medical offices, it's important to be able to know where medical offices. I have doctors and people reach out to me, hey, do you know of any offices? So I think as we build that ecosystem of people that specialize in healthcare and commercial healthcare space, that's very important because sometimes a salesperson will say, well, I have this space. This is perfect for what you need. Yeah. There's a lot of variables. If they don't know about healthcare and how healthcare works, it makes it a little bit tricky. And so I'd love to get more people that are specializing in that commercial space that deals with healthcare specifically, especially as, different practices and different people kind of move into that space. So, and then aside from that, anyone that's interested in supporting healthcare or getting in front of the healthcare community. We have companies that they'll contact us just to advertise on, because we get 30,000 views on our website a month.
Nice.
Which it's really high for being a healthcare, an industry specific regional website. But we've done very well, and 20,000 of those are unique views a month. So we do get tremendous amount of traffic. If you're trying to get, if you have a medical device or if you have a product or a nutritional product, any of that you'd like to get out, the website, is a great place to advertise. The newsletter is a great place to advertise.
Is there an event that you would like to talk about or announce right now on the air that you would like people to attend? So right now, you guys put together fundraisers, right?
So we put together different healthcare events constantly. My suggestion for everyone that's listening to the podcast or watching the podcast, definitely check out the Las Vegas Heals calendar. So if you go to lasvegasheals.org, we have one, which is the mental health resource, and then we'll have a mixer for mental health. We have another one we're planning for employee benefits managers that address high-cost claims, again, and kind of unpacking that. We have a lot of micro events that cater to our membership. And so sometimes that's employer benefits, sometimes that's the mental health. We do have a mental health coalition. So how do we bring that community together to deliver better care? We have another one that we were, right before this, we're planning on technology. So how do you protect your business? So there's events happening all of the time. We run, we did our opiate series on the opiate response within Southern Nevada. So that was like a six events that we did as a series to kind of address and bring that community. So there's a lot of communities that we try to bring together. I definitely encourage everyone to just keep an eye on the website so you can see what fits in for you.
All right. And in closing?
In closing, I just want to encourage everyone. Healthcare is very important. I am very excited about the future of, you asked me, well, how do you feel? Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic?
Right,
and I said, listen, the world is built by optimists. I'm very optimistic. I think that in this moment, we are at a very pivotal time. Las Vegas is transformed. I don't know how long you've been in Las Vegas.
18 years.
Okay, so you've seen a lot of changes, and I've seen it since I was a little kid when we went through our family phase. I think Las Vegas is more than just gaming now, as they try to bring the movie studios, as they try to bring in the different manufacturing and technology. We've seen a lot of diversification of our economy, and unfortunately, as they're looking to scale out, and economic development from the governor's office is trying to attract these businesses along with the LVGEA. Everyone says it's healthcare and education is why we don't want to move there. I think it's on healthcare to start working on this problem.
I agree.
And I think we have more spotlight than we ever have before. And if we can come up with solutions now that are practical and that actually work, we can assist and do our part in transforming what this city will be. I think we could be one of the top 5 cities in the United States within 10 years. But it's going to take healthcare doing its part and then the community supporting what healthcare needs.
definitely want to continue that conversation with you on how our staffing firm can actually join forces with your organization and make this happen for our state.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I look forward to it.
And so then your phone number is 702-237-2362 of your organization?
Yeah, if they want to reach out, they can get there. I'll throw my email out. If anyone wants to support or anything, it's Diego@LasVegasHeals.org. So very easy, right? Diego@LasVegasHeals.org. They can reach out and, I can connect them with who they need to talk to, or if they're just interested in membership, we can kind of show them everything that we have put together.
Well, once again, thank you so much for coming on the show, Diego. This is your first time, but it will not be your last.
Okay. All right. So I did all right. I was a little nervous.
No, you did fabulous.
Perfect. Thank you for having me.
So every Friday we try to release, unless we have technical difficulties. Sometimes we have technical difficulties. That's just life. But we try to release a new show every single Friday by 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And, I just want to make sure that you guys do know this beautiful studio, you guys can have access to it. There's actually 4 different rooms. This is my favorite, though. But you can reach out to Andrea Michelle, Creativa Consulting. Her number is 702-296-6242. Hasta la que siguiente.
Próxima.
Okay. Till the next time. God bless. Guys, make sure that you comment, that you follow, that you put whatever you want in those comment sections. Tell me what you want to see. What do you want to hear? Who do you want me to bring on the show? What type of celebrities do you want on this show, huh? What do you want us to cover? There's a lot of bills going on right now. What do you guys want us to help you pass?